All right, so this video is going to be to review for the first midterm, and this video is going to be one of 4 where we are going to focus in on chapter 1, problems. So Professor W gave you guys some problems to do on the review, and all of the answers are there. So I'm not going to spend time in the video going over these, but in case you don't have that handout, you can maybe like pause this and look at those. And then the other problems that I am going to go over in this video are from the textbook, but since not everybody uses a full textbook or doesn't, or maybe just like goes to the library or whatever, and the answers are in the back of the book, but I thought it would be helpful for you guys if I went over a couple of those problems that she has on the review here. All right, so the first question in chapter 1 is question 1.9. And in this question, it gives a couple different variables, and they're all quantitative variables, okay? But we wanted to say whether they are discrete or continuous. Whenever I'm thinking about this, discrete is like only whole number outcomes, whereas continuous variables like decimals are okay, or like are going to happen. So on the first question, it was like, hey, what about time studying for a test? Well, time is always going to be a continuous variable because the clock just keeps going and going and going. It's not a whole number of outcomes. You still have fractions or decimals of seconds. Amount of rain is also going to be a continuous variable because you can have decimals or fractions for amount of rain. And same with gasoline because both of those are fluids. So those are going to be continuous variables here. Whereas the number of customers that you see in a day would be a discrete quantitative variable because you would be able to only have a whole number of customers. Okay, and so that's the big difference between discrete variables and continuous variables. On question 1.19, we want to know, is this data from a population or from a sample? So population is like all of something and a sample is just a subset of it. So the first question here is the number of pizzas on a Friday night at all the pizza parlors in a certain city. And since the wording said all, that would be a population, okay, statistic or parameter actually that we get. Another question here is the money on insurance claims on only 200 policies. So since it gave us a subset number, that's going to be a sample. Whereas on C, it's going to be the money of each stock and the book referenced this S&P 500. Well, since it's each stock in this, that's going to be the population because it's all the stocks in that group. Same thing with part D, total attendance for each of the 18 MLS teams. So that's going to be a population. Whereas on E, I want to know like what's the living areas on 35 house living listings in like a large city. Well, that's not going to be all of them. That's going to be a sample. Okay. And then the last question on the review that was suggested for you guys to look over was in the self-review test, looking at problem number 4. And this is, again, a variable classification, qualitative or quantitative, and if quantitative, discrete or continuous. So women's favorite TV shows, well, that's going to be like categories. So that's a qualitative variable. Whereas salaries for football players, that's quantitative. And since it's a money amount, that's going to be a continuous variable. C is a little bit tricky. Number of pets owned. Well, the outcomes of that is going to be numbers, zeros, 1, 2, 3, and we can find an average of those numbers. So that is going to be a quantitative variable, but because you can only have a whole number, it's a discrete quantitative variable. And then the last question to look at here is favorite breed of dog. Well, since breed of dog is a name, it's a nominal category, we're going to say that that's a qualitative variable. And so that's a lot of what chapter 1 is on this review, is just, can you understand where data comes from and how to classify data sets? Is it qualitative or quantitative? And if the data is quantitative, if it's a numerical output, is it a discrete or a continuous variable? And if you can answer those questions, you're going to be just fine on this midterm.